The cameras warmed under the studio lights, humming softly above a stage that had seen countless debates, jokes, and heart-to-hearts. But this morning promised something different, though no one knew how different until it was too late. Two of the most scrutinized women alive were set to share a table. One had worn a crown, the other carried the aura of Hollywood royalty. Both carried reputations that divided opinion across the world. Meghan Markle was the first to appear. She glided across the stage in a crisp white outfit that looked more tailored for a palace reception than daytime television. Before we dive in, subscribe. Her smile was wide, practiced, but the flicker in her eyes betrayed the weight she always carried, the endless headlines, the whispers that followed her into every room. The audience clapped warmly, though the ripple of hushed commentary could be heard between the applause. Meghan was used to it by now. Minutes later, Angelina Jolie entered from the opposite side. She wore understated black, nothing flashy, but her presence alone drew admiration. Unlike Meghan, Angelina seemed to move with the steadiness of someone who no longer needed approval. The crowd clapped again, this time with a deeper kind of respect, the kind reserved for people who had weathered storms without theatrics. Whoopi Goldberg, seasoned in managing the chaos of live TV, smiled broadly as she introduced them. "We are so thrilled to have Meghan Markle and Angelina Jolie with us today." The panel nodded, the cameras tightened in, and the moment the two women faced each other, the air seemed to shift. The conversation began as expected. Meghan spoke first, her answers polished, leaning into familiar talking points. Her wellness projects, her advocacy for mental health, her vision of a more open world. She spoke well, but the words felt memorized, less like conversation and more like a press release. Still, the audience smiled, nodding along. When the questions turned to Angelina, her answers carried a different weight. She spoke not about herself, but about people she had met in refugee camps, children she had seen smile despite losing everything, women who fought for survival in oppressive regimes. Her tone was calm, stripped of vanity, and every sentence landed quietly but firmly. The first crack appeared almost unexpectedly. Meghan tilted her head, smiling in that way she often did when preparing to undercut with charm. "I admire the work Angelina has done," she said lightly. "But let's be honest. Sometimes those humanitarian trips look more like photo ops than real activism, don't they?" The studio seemed to inhale at once. It wasn't loud, just a ripple of tension, but everyone heard it. Joy Bahar's brows shot up, and Sarah Haynes glanced toward Angelina, bracing for impact. Angelina didn't blink. She leaned back slightly, her hands folded neatly. "If the work changes lives," she answered evenly. "The cameras don't matter. It's not about the photo, it's about the results." A small round of applause broke out, tentative but present. Meghan's smile never faded, though it sharpened at the edges. "Of course results matter," she countered smoothly. "But let's not pretend image isn't part of the game. Some people have mastered using it to their advantage." Her gaze flickered in Angelina's direction, just long enough for the audience to catch. Sarah jumped in quickly, eager to smooth things over. "You've both accomplished incredible things. Meghan, you've raised awareness around mental health. Angelina, you've done decades of work on the ground. Maybe it's fair to say there are different approaches to helping." Meghan let out a laugh that wasn't entirely lighthearted. "On the ground, yes, but also on the red carpet. Humanitarian work has become fashionable, let's not deny it." This time, Angelina's expression shifted, just barely. Her jaw tightened, her eyes sharpened. "Fashion doesn't push me to spend months in war zones, Meghan. Fashion doesn't put me in refugee camps where there's no electricity, no clean water, and no safety. That's not a performance. That's service." The audience clapped louder this time, sensing the bite beneath the composure. Joy, sensing both danger and opportunity, leaned forward. "Angelina, Are you saying Meghan's activism isn't as authentic? Angelina smiled faintly, though her gaze never left Meghan. I'm saying authenticity is measured by what you do when no one's watching, not by how many interviews you give about it. The room gasped. The sound wasn't just surprise, it was recognition of the knife that had just been slid across the table. Meghan adjusted a strand of hair behind her ear, her face still locked in that polished grin. Well, she said with sugary precision, I suppose not everyone needs to perform sainthood to stay relevant. The table went still. Even Whoopi shifted uncomfortably, her voice attempting to corral the storm. All right. Let's take a breath. We're not here to pit women against each other. But the atmosphere had changed, irrevocably. Meghan's subtle barbs and Angelina's quiet defiance had turned the air heavy, electric, as though the studio lights themselves were waiting for the next spark. As the first commercial break rolled, the audience buzzed with whispered speculation. Meghan leaned toward her water, muttering something under her breath, just out of microphone range. Whatever it was, Angelina's eyes caught it, her face still controlled, but her gaze a fraction sharper. The cameras cut, but the storm had only begun to gather. Everyone in the room, from the co-hosts to the production assistants, could feel it. When they came back from break, the smiles would not hold. The return from commercial was quiet, a little too quiet. Even the audience, normally buzzing with chatter between segments, seemed to sense that something unusual was happening on that stage. When the cameras flicked back on, Joy Behar forced a smile, hoping to steer the mood toward lighter waters. Well, ladies, she said with a half laugh, I think we can all agree the world needs more strong women doing strong things, right? Angelina smiled gently and nodded. Absolutely. Meghan leaned forward, her voice wrapped in honey but edged with steel. Oh, I completely agree. Some of us use our strength to inspire others. She paused just long enough to let the tension thicken. Prefer to remind everyone of their importance every time a camera flashes, the audience murmured. A few laughed nervously, unsure if it was meant as a joke. Whoopi cleared her throat, determined to redirect. Let's talk about impact. Angelina, your work with the UN Refugee Agency has spanned decades. Meghan, you've been outspoken about mental health and women's rights. What motivates you both to keep going? Angelina spoke first, her voice soft but steady. The people I meet. Families who've lost everything but still hold on to hope. Children who've seen war and yet find a reason to smile. They remind me that service is about them, not me. The crowd gave a warm ripple of applause. Meghan cut in before the co-hosts could move on. Right, but I think who tells the story matters. It's one thing to fly into a refugee zone with full security and clearance, and another to live under constant scrutiny, day after day. That's a different kind of pressure. Angelina turned, her eyes cool and unshaken. There's a difference between being scrutinized and being challenged, she said evenly, and an even greater difference between advocacy and branding. Gasps rolled through the audience. Meghan kept her smile frozen in place, though her fingers tightened around her glass. She tilted her head slightly, the gesture sweet, but dangerous. Well, I suppose some of us resonate more with today's audiences. It's called evolution. Younger generations value openness and vulnerability. They don't want saviors. They want honesty. For the first time, Angelina's composure cracked ever so slightly. Her mouth twitched as though weighing the cost of a sharper reply. When she spoke, her voice was low but steady. Openness isn't the same as oversharing. Vulnerability doesn't mean monetizing pain. The audience stirred again, caught between admiration and shock. Whoopi jumped in quickly. Okay, let's bring this back to shared values. But Meghan wasn't finished. She gave a light laugh that didn't reach her eyes. It's fascinating, really. People who've been praised their whole lives for beauty and talent suddenly feel threatened when voices they can't control get louder. That one landed hard. Angelina didn't respond immediately. letting the weight of the words hang in the air. Finally, she turned to the co-hosts, her voice directed not at Meghan, but to the room. I didn't come here to compete in a popularity contest. I didn't come to measure myself against anyone's spotlight. I came to talk about broken systems, displaced families, and people who don't have the luxury of walking away. But somehow the conversation keeps circling back to her. The studio gasped again, a sound that cut sharper than applause. Meghan's face hardened, though her lips stretched into another practiced smile. "Oh, I'm sorry," she replied, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "I forgot this was your show." Sarah Haynes tried to smooth the edges. "What we're seeing are two very different approaches to advocacy, and maybe that's okay. There's space for both." But Meghan interrupted, her words sharp. "Is it advocacy, though? Or just a performance of humility? Some people wear their cause like a crown, others like a costume." Angelina finally leaned forward, her posture still elegant but her eyes sharper than glass. "And some people confuse attention with purpose." The silence was immediate and suffocating. No clapping, no murmurs, just the sound of the audience holding its collective breath. Whoopi raised her hand like a referee trying to break up a fight. "Let's just take a second." Deep breath. But the studio had shifted again, and no one was breathing. Meghan crossed her legs tightly, smoothing the fabric of her dress with controlled precision. Her smile was thin, brittle. "You know," she said icily, "people warned me about you. They said you pretend to support women, but can't handle it when another one shines too brightly." Angelina's face went still. For a moment she said nothing, then let out a soft, deliberate laugh. "No one shines too brightly for me, Meghan. But I do have a problem with people who mistake the spotlight for substance." Joy muttered almost inaudibly, "Oh my God!" The words hung in the dead air, barely caught by the microphones. The temperature in the studio dropped like ice water had been poured across the table. The co-hosts exchanged worried glances, each one silently wondering how to salvage a segment spiraling out of control. But by now, they all knew it was too late. The break came faster than expected, a relief to the panel and crew, but not to the audience, who sat in stunned silence. Behind the cameras, producers huddled like firefighters at a blaze, torn between cutting the segment entirely or letting the chaos play out for ratings gold. When the cameras flickered off, Meghan adjusted her chair, leaning forward just slightly as though ready for another round. Angelina, by contrast, sat still, serene, her composure now more weapon than shield. The storm had passed the point of return, and everyone could feel it. The third act was coming, and it would not be pretty. The studio lights dimmed slightly as they returned from the next break, but nothing could dim the tension pressing down on the set. Meghan had returned to her seat, though barely. She perched on the edge of her chair, posture stiff, her hands folded too tightly in her lap. Across from her, Angelina sat in near-perfect stillness, arms resting lightly on the table, her face calm but unreadable. It was the silence of someone who didn't need to raise her voice to dominate a room. Whoopi, ever the professional, tried to regain control. Her voice, though steady, had a hint of strain. "Welcome back. We're all still processing. Maybe we can..." "Processing what exactly?" Meghan cut in, her tone sweet but sharp enough to slice. "That a woman with a platform and a husband and a cause can't speak her truth without being labeled a narcissist?" Angelina didn't so much as blink. Joy Behar shook her head gently. "No one called you that," Meghan laughed bitterly. "Not with words. But we all know what's being implied here. That I hijacked the conversation, that I made it about me. Isn't that right?" She turned and locked eyes with Angelina. "Why don't you just say it?" Angelina blinked once, slowly. "You just did." The air cracked. The silence afterward was louder than any outburst could have been. Even the crew seemed frozen in place, waiting for the next blow. Meghan's smile slipped into something colder. "I came here to uplift women," she snapped. "But apparently that's only acceptable if I sit quietly and nod while Saint Angelina lectures us about morality from her marble tower." Angelina turned her head slightly, her expression still calm, but her words sharp as glass. "No one asked you to be quiet. We asked you to listen." That was the spark that ignited the fire. Meghan pushed back her chair, the legs scraping across the studio floor with a screech that echoed like a warning siren. She stood, heels clicking sharply against the stage as her voice rose. "You don't get to lecture me. You don't know the first thing about what I've sacrificed, about being hunted by tabloids, about being used by an institution and spat out when I wouldn't play their game." Angelina's tone stayed even, though the weight of her words landed like stones. "You were given a choice, Meghan. Some of us never had one." The audience gasped. Meghan's cheeks flushed, her chest heaving. She turned toward the panel, voice cracking under the strain. "This whole thing is a farce. This show, this fake sisterhood, this performance of feminism that's really just competition in disguise." She jabbed a finger toward the co-hosts. "And you, every one of you, sat here and let her tear me down. You let her diminish me while you smiled for the cameras." The co-hosts sat stunned. Whoopi's lips pressed into a thin line, unwilling to fuel the fire. Joy stared at the floor, while Sarah Haynes looked like she wanted to vanish entirely. Finally, Angelina spoke. Her voice soft but devastating. "No one diminished you, Meghan. You did that yourself." The audience reacted audibly, a sharp intake of collective breath. It wasn't applause, it wasn't laughter. It was the sound of disbelief, of witnessing something that wasn't supposed to happen on daytime television. Meghan's fists clenched, her voice trembling. "You think you're untouchable, that your trauma is somehow purer, more valid. You think you're better because you cry behind closed doors instead of speaking your truth." Angelina didn't move, her eyes steady. "Maybe that's the difference. I cry when no one's watching. You cry for the world." It was quiet, almost whispered, but it hit like thunder. Meghan froze for a moment, her breath jagged, her smile now gone entirely. She looked out toward the audience, then at the co-hosts, then back at Angelina, her eyes glittering with fury. "Oh, please," she spat, her voice breaking. "You're nothing but a bitter actress, desperate to stay relevant by cutting down someone younger, louder, and more loved." Angelina didn't blink. Her reply was steady, surgical. "I'd rather be relevant for what I do than infamous for what I say." Even Whoopi, usually unshakable, raised her brows at that one. The panel sat in stunned silence, unwilling to interrupt the duel that had swallowed the show whole. Sarah finally whispered what everyone was thinking. "Maybe we need a real break." But Meghan ignored her. She leaned forward, fury spilling from every word. "You're just another gatekeeper, hiding behind carefully rehearsed whispers and tragic stories. You pretend to champion women. But the moment one of us refuses to play by your rules, you tear us down." Angelina leaned in too, her voice dropping to a whisper so sharp it cut through the noise. "The spotlight only feels bright to those who need it." Meghan's breath hitched. For a moment her composure shattered, the facade slipping. Her hands trembled as she reached for her glass but didn't drink. She looked to the audience again, then back at Angelina, almost daring her to push further. The cameras captured every twitch, every flicker. The audience was no longer watching a talk show. They were watching a battle, a clash of two worlds, two philosophies, two women who refused to yield. And yet, through it all, Angelina remained calm. Meghan, trembling, seemed to unravel. The more she pushed, the less power she seemed to hold. The storm wasn't over. Everyone could feel it. The finale was still coming, and when it did, the walls of daytime television would shake. If you like this video, then subscribe.